One of Rick Stiggins' most famous quotes is that students can hit any target they can see and which stands still for them. Over time, we have found this quote to be true. However, we need to make sure that the targets we give students to aim for and that we ourselves spend so much time and energy helping students reach are truly worthy of the effort. How can we do this? There are 4 questions that can help us to know that our learning statements are worthy of focus and instructional time. And the purpose of this video is to review these 4 questions so that we can use them to analyze our learning statements from our deconstruction. The first question we need to consider when we are analyzing the learning statements on our deconstruction is, will the learning indicated in this statement endure over time? To what extent does it give meaning and importance to facts? Some examples of learning statements that would answer this question would be rearranging equations algebraically in a math class, defining and explaining democracy in social studies, analyzing a system in science. Students will see this learning over and over, and they will possibly continue to build on it, so we can say that this type of learning would have endurance. The next question we need to ask ourselves about the learning statements on our deconstruction would be, does the learning indicated in the statement have leverage? To what extent does it transfer to other topics, fields, and adult life? Excellent examples of learning statements that would respond to this criteria are Tier 2 vocabulary, such as comparison, explanation, verify, claim, analyze. These are terms that students will see over and over again in a variety of classes, and they need to not only be able to define these terms, but to use them. And so we could say Tier 2 academic vocabulary would certainly have leverage. Our third question to consider when looking at the learning statements in our deconstruction is the learning indicated in the statement foundational? To what extent do students need to learn this information to progress to the next level of learning? Some examples of learning statements that would address this question would be learning statements involving mastering writing a complete sentence in a language arts class, or being very solid with order of operations in math. We want to make sure that the learning we identify as foundational is truly necessary in order to proceed, but if it is, then it certainly addresses this criteria. Last but not least, we want to consider to what extent is the learning indicated by the statement intervention worthy? Will teachers provide varied instruction and extended time to ensure that students learn this concept or skill? One way to help determine if a learning statement is intervention worthy is to consider if your grade level is the end of the road or an endpoint for this learning statement. If so, it is probably intervention worthy. For example, according to the Common Core, students should have fractions and percentages mastered by the end of 7th grade. So if you're looking at a 7th grade math learning statement that has to do with mastering percentages or fractions, it's probably intervention worthy. Similarly, the Common Core calls for students to have mastered basic conventions by the end of 7th grade. So again, if I'm in 7th grade and I'm looking at learning statements that deal with writing incomplete sentences or using appropriate punctuation, those statements would probably be intervention worthy. So to review, there are 4 key questions that we use to evaluate the learning statements in our deconstruction. The first question is, will the indicated learning in the statement endure over time? Our second question, to what extent does the indicated learning transfer to other subjects? Next, how foundational is the learning indicated by the statement? And last but not least, to what extent is the learning indicated by the statement intervention worthy? It is not necessary for a learning statement to meet all 4 criteria. However, you would want it to meet most of the criteria here to make sure that we are spending our time and energy and our students' time and energy on learning that is truly essential.